All right, folks, today we are going to jump into a little bit about journalism. And I think that this is coming at a really important time in the course. We have learned about the importance of communicating ag issues, but now we're going to really learn how to communicate those ag issues. So we're really going to focus right now on chapter 5 of the textbook, just to kind of get us an overview of why news writing is important and kind of what comes with that. And then you will work through some different assignments in your module that will hopefully help kind of bring this all together for you. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to go through this word for word because I just think that's crazy, but I wanted to really showcase to you kind of what I'm thinking and what real journalists learn about. It's important to think about the fact that we don't have journalism as we know it. The newspaper business is really hurting because of obviously websites and social media, people getting their news in other ways. And so I think it's important to really think about how we are still going to try to stay true to journalistic principles, knowing that the way that we go about finding the news, reading the news, consuming the news changes every single day. In order to do all of those things well, you have to be able to still be a good journalist. And to be a good communicator starts with being a good writer. You'll notice in this class, I put a lot of emphasis on being a good writer because I think that that's one of the #1 ways that we communicate effectively. If you have misspellings, if it's hard to understand, if you're writing in the way that you're speaking, it makes it really, really difficult to be professional in the way that you're writing. And so if any of you have gotten comments from me or heard me talk about in your feedback and grading about, being more professional, not writing the way we speak, this is really a good time to kind of hone those skills and to learn what I'm talking about. We're going to talk mostly about news stories. So in this class, you will write a feature story and a news story kind of combined. I try not to get in an introduction class too bogged down in the differences. I really just want you to learn about transitioning from writing in the way that you may have for your other classes or scientific writing into this journalistic style that we're learning about in this module. So with that being said, let's kind of jump in and talk about what it is to write a news story. News is supposed to be something that's relevant to our time. So that can show up on radio, on TV, and newspapers and magazines, and obviously social media, news networks, posts online, things like that. Even our biggest news sources have social media pages. And so to make something newsworthy, though, it doesn't matter what platform you're using, you have to understand something that is newsworthy is all about making it be timely. So is it something that just happened or something that's about to happen? Is it close to the audience? So remember, we talk about the #1 role of communications is knowing your audience. So if your audience is in the state of Texas, then is it something happening inside or near the state of Texas? Is it something happening near and dear to your audience that's only involved in agriculture? So let's say you have an ag related topic that really appeals to lots of people, your location becomes less relevant. You care more about, all people that are producing beef or all people that are producing chickens or all people that are involved in horticulture. And so it may not be specific to a region. It just really depends on the topic. And then prominence. So are you talking about an important person or an important event? Factors that also determine news value is something significant. So are a lot of people impacted by the topic, or is it something that's really appealing emotionally? So like I said, in this class, you'll go through and actually do a news story, and it'll probably be something that you just enjoy talking about or something that you find interesting. It doesn't necessarily have to be an event that's happening next week. It can be something that has an emotional appeal, like a human interest story. Something that was really interesting to read about or something really cool that happened that people would want to know about. Anything involving conflict, money, or things that are unusual or innovative are also very newsworthy. And journalistic writing is similar to composition writing, which is what you do when you write most of your papers. But when we start to kind of transition from a composition type style to a news writing style, we want things to be the ABCs: accurate, brief, and clear. You kind of remove yourself from the situation. It's not about your opinion anymore. It's about what happened and the facts. So we talk about the 5 W's. You've heard this before, and we often talk about the how. So the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why are your 5 W's. And then how something happened or how something is going to happen can also be relevant depending on your topic. Choose the most important of these and build on that. We talk about something called an inverted pyramid, and I'll show it to you, where you put the most important information first. So your lead is something that you will do in this module where you actually practice really getting your 5 W's and your H in that first paragraph. And then your second paragraph expands on that, and then the body of the paragraph goes from there. And so you start with the most important and you go to the least important. The most important is there to grab the reader's attention. If you're thinking about scrolling on social media or even reading an article or a magazine or something in a magazine, you want to read the most important information first, because if they quit reading, you hope that they got at least the gist of what you're trying to say. That is different than normal writing, where you start with an introduction and then you build a body and then you build a conclusion and you wrap it all up and you kind of tell a story, and you start from the beginning and you go to the end. Here, you almost start with the end and then you fill in the details after that. So you put the most important information and then you go from there. If a story is cut in a newsroom, so let's say we write a beautiful press release about some event that's happening on campus at SFA, you put the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why, the very beginning, because let's say the Pine Log is going to publish it and we send them a news story. If they don't have room to print the entire story, they cut from the bottom. So you don't want to put your most important information at the bottom because it could potentially get cut. So this is kind of a visual, once again, of what that looks like. But you'll work on leads in this module. This is the first paragraph of your story. And so if you've ever heard the term buried the lead, like you didn't tell me the most important information first. If somebody's telling you a story, they may say, dude, you buried the lead. Like you didn't tell me the really cool part at the very beginning. Why'd you do that? That's where this phrase comes from, because the lead is just like it sounds. It leads off your story. So this is usually one sentence, could be 2 or 3, depending on what you're writing about, but it answers those most important questions. Then your second paragraph will explain the lead a little more. It expands on the details in the lead and provides some background. And then you can go on to explain more and more. So this presents the information in order of importance, not chronological order. Do not write in first person. Don't say, I felt this way, I thought this, I walked into a room and this is what happened. You also don't write in second person. What do you think about that? How would you feel if this happened to you? All of those things have to be cast aside. We do not care anymore about your views and your opinions. That is a really hard habit to get out of, because that's the way that a lot of you are used to writing. And so I really want you to work on reading your stories after you've written them and making sure you don't have I's, me's, ours, you, yours, mine, theirs in there, because it's not about you and me anymore. It's about writing for the masses. And so we have to take ourselves out of it. Only present the facts, eliminate adjectives, and attribute information that is not common knowledge. So if you're writing about something really technical, like let's say artificially inseminating a cow, you need to be able to say, Dr. Mahaffey, animal science professor at Stephen F. Austin University, said blah, blah, blah about artificially inseminating the cow. If it's not common knowledge, like the first president of the United States was George Washington, then you have to quote somebody or tell somebody what your source is. That way you can remain impartial. News writing happens in short sentences and short paragraphs. So as we get used to the more composition type writing, you have a really big chunk of information that's your introduction. And then maybe you have 2 or 3 paragraphs that are your body and then a conclusion. And you were taught to like make your conclusion mirror your introduction, and that they kind of like are bookends and they wrap up your story and they hold the body of your story really nicely. Okay, well, forget all that. That's not what we're doing here. We are writing short, sweet, to the point, 1 to 2, maybe 3 sentences per paragraph, maybe 5 if you want to keep all of your ideas together. But in theory, you should be able to keep everything really short and concise, because as you get used to reading more news type articles, you'll see that this really makes it easier to read and understand a lot of facts in an easy way. You can say they, you can say she, you can say it, you can say he, you can use lots of nouns and verbs. We want that to stand out more than like an adjective where we say the sky was really beautiful. We want to say things about Dr. Mahaffey observed that the sky was really beautiful and made note of that. That's a different spin, and that keeps you from being impartial. It keeps you impartial, I should say, so that you aren't inserting your own opinions into a news story. You'll see when we do a press release, that'll be next week. We'll do a press release assignment. You'll learn all about the components of a press release, but you'll often see to note at the end of a press release the number 30 or a number sign, and that indicates that the story is over. That is because if your story goes more than one page, you always put the word more at the bottom so that somebody knows there's more to it. If you are sending your story to a newsroom where they're getting lots of press releases at one time, you want to make sure people know that there's a second page. So rather than numbering it 1 and 2, journalists say more, and then when they're done, they do a number 30 or the little pound sign, also now known as a hashtag, but in this context, it's not a hashtag. Crazy. Avoid jargon, avoid slang. We don't want to hear like acronyms for things unless they're really relevant to your conversation, and always use transitions. So furthermore, moreover, next, we did this. After that, comma, we did this. Make sure you can transition from paragraph to paragraph really nicely. When you start to use more, when you start to use smaller and shorter paragraphs to get your point across, it really helps the flow of your article to use transitions. If you're not familiar with using transitions, I suggest just doing a quick Google search of common transitions in news writing, and you'll start to get some ideas of ways that you can incorporate that into your writing. We will talk all about quotations. Quotations really add life to your story. They help you be able to, once again, remain impartial. If you're quoting somebody, you're just reporting the facts of what somebody said. You may take a direct quote where you put it in quotation marks, or you may have an indirect quote where you paraphrase and you still attribute what they said to that person, but you don't have it in quotations as a verbatim quote. You have to attribute all quotes and tell readers where your source came from. So if you decide to do an interview about horses and you interview Dr. Jones in the ag department, you would want to make sure that everybody knows that she said whatever it is that you're writing about, because that gives credibility to your article, that you've talked to an expert and that was something that that person said. Common knowledge, once again, doesn't have to be attributed, but be really careful in your interpretation of that, because what's common knowledge to you may not be common knowledge to everybody. And this is a really great example of an indirect quote. So Myers said the incident was under investigation. Instead of saying the incident was under investigation, period. If you said the incident was under investigation, you did put a name with it, your readers would be led to wonder, well, how did they know that? Where did that information come from? It adds credibility to what you're saying if you tell who the person is that is saying what you're writing. You may use a partial quote. So Myers said the incident was being investigated, but it would be, quote, a long time before the investigation is complete, unquote. Pay very careful attention to how they have formatted this. They said the name of the person, the word said, so that you understand it's not the incident was being investigated, said Myers. It's Myers said the incident was being investigated. They use a comma, they add a little bit, and then they put the direct quote in quotation marks. The period always goes inside of the quotation marks. So that's a really common mistake. So make sure that you're doing that correctly. Here's a direct quote. This is the opposite of an indirect quote. You see how the name comes first here, the name comes last here, or sometimes in the middle if it's a longer sentence. So open quotation, the incident was under investigation, comma, close quotation marks, Myers said, period. So this is all one sentence. The comma and the closed quotation marks are really important that you don't put a period here, because you need the Myers said portion to be in your sentence as well. So making sure that you're properly quoting your sources is really a big part of news writing. There's another example where there is maybe a longer sentence, and notice there's not a period until the very end of the quotation. So the incident is under investigation, comma, close quotation marks, Myers said, comma, then they complete their sentence, put a period and a close quotation mark. So use this as an example of how to structure your quotes in your assignments. Anytime you quote somebody the first time in this news story, you use their first and last name and their title. After that, you can just use their last name. You'll notice when you read news articles in this module that that is the case. You'll notice that over and over. Every quotation and should have its own attribution. So those quotes in that format we just looked at, every single time you quote somebody, it has to be formatted in one of those ways. And then each direct quotation should have its own paragraph. So remember, we're doing short, sweet paragraphs. So every quotation mark can have their own paragraph. Use the word said for attribution. That said is a really neutral word, and it keeps it impartial. So you don't want to say, he exclaimed, he excitedly told me. Those types of things are too flowery and too fluffy for news writing. So always use the word said and keep it safe. Especially as you're learning, it's easier just to use the word said. As you get a little better, you can expand and kind of learn what's appropriate to kind of add to that. But it's really important when you're trying to stay impartial to just use the word said. Every journalist and every public relations person uses the AP style book. I talk about that in the module, so you can read that page on your own. But it helps you learn the universal way of how to do news writing. So when you take a news writing class, you will actually learn every letter of the alphabet and all the things that fall within those. So how do you write titles? How do you write certain words that start with the letter A through Z? And it tells you all of those things. And sometimes they're really kind of funny and weird. And you can take an entire class on how to learn to use AP style. And it changes every year. So an old AP style book may not be relevant today. And that just keeps you current with the news. If you're going to be reporting the news and it's relevant and timely, you have to make sure that you're using the relevant things. So we won't get too bogged down in the AP style book and how to do that in this course, but it's important that you just know what it is. Feature writing is a little bit different. It gives more detail. It allows you to kind of paint a complete picture. So it kind of goes back to that composition style that you're used to, but it still kind of follows where you have a lead and you give the most important information first. But you can get a little bit more detailed and kind of be a little more flowery than you can in a news article. It always has short sentences, brief paragraphs, good descriptions, and quotations. So all of those things are still there, but it does allow for a little more freedom and creativity. So I think I'm going to stop there. I hope this helped kind of give you a little bit of an overview of news writing and why it is so important. And if you get confused or you want more information, once again, you can go to chapter 5 of your text and learn a little bit more there. So thanks for listening. Bye.